in the interest of staying on time, we'll get started. So first of all, it's great to see you today, but it was really good to see you guys in person at the event last month. It's been so long for me since I've been in a room with so many other people and got to eat food and drink coffee and talk to them. It was really nice to see people. But we're back to Hollywood Squares for this meeting. So welcome to this meeting of the Governor's Broadband Task Force. And I will hand it over to Jaron to do some housekeeping items and the public comments. And then we will progress through our agenda today. Please, if you do have any questions, raise them as we go. But Jaron, housekeeping items.
Thank you, Chris. Yeah, welcome everyone. Great to see you again. Thanks again for attending. Today is a Governor's Task Force on Broadband Access meeting, and it is November 16th, 2022. Just like to remind everyone that this is a public meeting that is being recorded. A meeting agenda is available on the Public Service Commission events calendar and is also available on the task force webpage. Little standard procedure here, just in an effort to maintain audio quality. If you could just mute yourself when you're not speaking, that would be great. I also ask that members of the public be mindful of their audio and remain muted throughout the duration of the meeting, other than during the public comment period, which will be coming up shortly. So I'm going to go ahead and quickly do roll call for those that are members of the task force. Let's start with Chris Meyer.
Here.
Biko Baker. Marta Beckdahl.
Here.
Brittany Beyer.
Here.
Sal Carranza. Shannon Clark. Lori Collins.
Here.
Doug Cox. Angie Dickinson. Emily Dittmar.
Here.
Celeste Flynn.
Here.
Chris Herjong.
Here.
Justin Hebner.
Here.
Gail Hike.
Here.
Barbara Koldos.
Here.
Senator Markline. Jose Martinez.
Present.
Representative Myers.
Here.
Representative Mursaw. Senator Paff. Rachel Shemlin.
Here.
Steve Schneider.
Here.
Michelle Schuler.
Here.
Brett Schupner.
Here.
Jennifer Schilling. Chet Streeb. Chad Young.
Here.
All right, that is the bottom of my list. Did any folks join us while I was calling attendance? Did any folks that I missed or anyone that joined us midway through? All right, I am not hearing anything. And I can keep an eye on the participant list if someone joins late. Well, as Chris said, let's just jump right into the public comment. So now is the time where we will allow for public comment. Members of the public may unmute and make a public comment. I would just ask that that public comment remain brief and also pertain to the subject of broadband access. You can also use the chat function in Zoom to let us know if you'd like to make a public comment. I'm going to go ahead and ask for public comment right now. And I'm going to make a second call for any public comments. And finally, a final call for any public comments. All right, I am not hearing any. Just excuse me, sorry, I just muted myself there. I'm not hearing any, but I just want to let folks know that we do accept written public comment on a rolling, ongoing basis. And we've got directions on how to do that on our task force webpage, along with other information like meeting agendas, recordings, and other updates. So that's a great resource if folks are interested. I'm going to turn it over to either Chris or Kristen for our next agenda item, where we will debrief the October task force meeting and talk about the Internet for All kickoff event that we had in Wausau last month. Chris or Kristen, I'm not sure if we're...
Kristen, go right ahead.
Okay, Kristen.
Got about a half an hour on the calendar on the time clock this afternoon, to talk about the October 25th event in Wausau. And I'm going to screen share for a second, just to remind us of what we did during the second half of the event. We did a flip chart exercise with Post-it notes in which we went through a series of questions very quickly. We divided into organizations by type, and then we looked at what we do as organizations, what we have in terms of assets that we bring to the broadband expansion table, what we need, and what if we could wave a magic wand and have anything we want or need, what would be nice to have. And so we've collected all of this information. It's stored on the SharePoint for our task force. We're not going to use this today. We have that, and we also have the how we can connect information. But I do want to remind everybody that we did this, kind of put us in that frame of mind again, and let you all know that the information is available. We'll revisit this in future task force meetings, but today we really wanted to focus on debriefing and talking about our time together. So I'm going to stop my screen share and go to a different screen to share. As we did last year, for those of you who are carrying over your participation, we are going to use Google Documents as a temporary workspace. And I'm looking for my chat function here. Today on Google Documents, we have the answers from homework that we assigned a couple of weeks ago when you got your task force notice. And so I just found the chat. Let me put the link to this document in here. Wonders of technology, let us have this, if you can access Google Documents, as a handout to look over while we talk. So in the homework, in order to reorient ourselves to our time together, we asked a couple of questions. Think back to the statewide Internet for All meeting with the PSC and the NTIA. What was new or surprising, and what has stuck with you? What are the things we should continue forward? When you're looking at this document, if you're in it right now, it's actually a snip from a Microsoft Word table that wouldn't come over forward. So if you're trying to type in it now, your words will either be in front of or behind the document, but it is 2 pages long. And our second question, which we'll come to in a minute, we scroll down, is throughout the year, we'll be looking to the task force to help us identify highlights and examples of success. And if you have any of those to share, we can talk about those today and perhaps invite some folks in as future conversation partners. So back up to the first one. Question 1, let's open it up for discussion. What was new or surprising to you in October? What has stuck with you? We're a month out from the event. And what are you thinking of today? How are your memories of the event? With that, I'm going to stop my screen share for a second and we'll come back to this, but you're free to look at it through the link in the chat. Does anyone have a takeaway they'd like to share, or something they've been thinking about since our October event?
Kristen, I would be happy to share. I see my video got bumped off. One of the things that I was interested in hearing more about and learning about was that when Theron Rutna from NTIA shared that every Wisconsin tribe put in an application to a recent tribal broadband round of funding, and that in addition to that, they would be great partners for collaborating on BEAD, digital equity, and middle mile funding to get to the speeds that would be required.
The tribal applications. We had a couple of comments about the speed requirements in the feedback from the meeting, the new speed requirements. Does anyone have any comments about that or anything they'd like to share or anything they'd like to add to what Rachel said? We're a quiet group today. Let's try a different question on what are the things that we should continue moving forward that were discussed. I think from my recollection, there were quite a number of interesting and new ideas coming down the pike. What are the things that you heard on October 25th that we'd like to move forward?
This is Brittany. The item that's really coming to mind right now is the mapping part of the conversation. I think there were a couple of really interesting pieces that communities can be thinking about. How do we get more communities to think about that type of mapping? What are the resources to help with the better mapping? Obviously, the FCC and their improved maps are flowing down, but that's going to be kind of a snapshot. And how do we help communities have something that helps them plan and kind of phase into the future? So those were some of the things that I think communities are trying to figure out themselves. And, I think there were some great ideas that we need to keep at the forefront.
Yeah, this is Michelle Schuler. I'll play off of what Brittany said. I think mapping is important from a few areas. Mapping equitable access and affordable access along with our assets. So as communities are thinking about navigators, how do we help them become digital navigators, and what type of assets are in the community versus what is not in the community?
Mapping of assets, mapping of physical infrastructure.
Mm-hmm.
Other comments about mapping or some of the other topics that we talked about. If you weren't at the meeting in October, and we've had a couple of folks who were unable, what have you been thinking about this past month when it comes to broadband?
So Kristen, this is
Oh, sorry. Go ahead. Okay, I will. One of my thoughts, I'm sorry I wasn't unable to attend last month's meeting. But one of the thoughts is, I think earlier there was mention in terms of at least setting the stage for a so-called prerequisite in terms of what we're looking in new broadband speed requirements. And so my thoughts were, as I'm thinking, I said, well, where are we at today in terms of the implementation of this infrastructure? And I know that quite a few dollars have been invested in that. And if there is that new, at least parameters that we're looking at a requirement, where does Wisconsin stand in terms of that infrastructure? So is Wisconsin moving in that direction? The dollars that have been invested so far, does that investment in this resource allows for for Wisconsin to be able to meet those requirements or those presets? And if not, in terms of reallocating of these investments or resources, how difficult will it be and how more costly would it be in terms of saying, okay, if this is the new prerequisite, can we move to that standard? And if so, what will it require us to move into the standard? What will be the steps and the additional resources that we may need to allocate in order for us to be able, as Wisconsinites, be able to move into that new standard? At least this would be my processes in terms of thinking. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Jose. So an understanding of really what are our prerequisites and where are we across the state. Fantastic. And Barbara.
Hi, Barbara New North. just, this is not pertaining to this question, but you had said something about a takeaway from the event itself. And I would just be curious to know what the breakdown of attendees was from the event, you know, from providers to municipalities to, as well as their location and where they came from and where they're attending from, just to understand the distribution of the state and their interest level in broadband.
I think we're probably able to get that. I'm going to guess that we are.
I had asked if we could get listing at least for the New North region, and I was not able to get that. So I don't know if that's something that, you know, we would want, but it's just, you know, data, right? Like what kind of data we can get from those who are interested in what the event was about.
And Alyssa, you unmuted. Yeah.
I could just say there was 147 people in person. There was 207 people virtually. And the attendance, the registration was handled by NTIA. And so that's the federal organization. They have some of their own policies around sharing registration data. So we're able to get the numbers, but to Barbara's points, we're not able to share a person, you know, share out the email list because they register through the federal entity. But the numbers, those are the numbers.
It was a full room. It's very nice. Other comments or questions?
Just an observation on my part, I think is well attended. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to be there, but sounds like equally amount of those present as well as those attended virtually. So it seems like there's a lot of interest in this subject matter.
I would agree. I would agree. It was literally a full room. It was good. Do we have did we record? I should know the answer to this. We did record it, if I recall.
Yeah. I would just say that we do have recording links posted of the full day event on, we've got an Internet for All webpage within the Wisconsin Broadband Office kind of web presence. I can post a link, and then we've also got the agenda for the full day event, and then we've got just a specific recording of the task force meeting as well on the task force webpage. So we've got all the recordings that you might be interested in watching if you're looking to watch a 5-hour recording. So.
Put it on double speed and watch it in 2.5 hours. Other comments or questions or you know, related to the October event or where we're standing right now and what you've been thinking about? I mean, a lot of news has been coming out, a lot of great news, good news, and there's been a lot to kind of digest the last couple of weeks.
Probably our biggest thoughts have been around supply chain issues and the ability to get fiber and permitting. And, you know, I think that the event on October 25th was I really appreciated the carrier interaction and sort of laying some real issues on the table that need to be addressed, you know, whether that's access to labor and crews for you know, moving projects forward, or whether that's access to fiber supplies where some carriers have adequate access and others are having real difficulty. I thought perhaps the most pointed comment that would be extremely useful was in the carrier or the ISP group sort of saying, hey, we all should get together every month and talk through some of these things, and we need to be working more closely with each other. And I thought that breakout was extremely valuable.
It gets back to the piece on communication, and that as we're building out this infrastructure, there's a physical infrastructure, but there's also you know, social connections. If we think of communication as social connections and a network of everyone along that supply chain that we want to connect in some way. So thanks for that observation, Steve. Yeah.
So Kristen, this is Chris Meyer, and the event I thought was awesome. I had a lot of fun. I talked to a lot of folks, but One of the sort of undercurrents I picked up, especially from some of those on the telecom side, was some concern really around the massive amount of money that's being pushed out here. And they specifically have talked more recently about the recent NTIA study talking about of the people who don't have internet, how many are willing to actually pay for it if it comes by their house, and that number being fairly small. And so, you know, as we look at the broadband rollout across the state, I think it's important to be talking a lot about adoption. Because that's clearly where one of the biggest concerns of the ISPs is, that we can put all this in the ground and spend millions and millions of dollars. But studies have shown that we're probably not going to get as much uptick with residents as we think. I think that's a big question mark, but it's one of the things I definitely took away from the event.
I guess one thing I'd chime in on, and this goes back to I wasn't able to attend on live, but I did watch the video of at least our session portion of it. And I think one of the things is, again, this BEAD funding is a different mechanism than what we've had before. It's a lot of money coming down the pipe, but it is in theory to finish Wisconsin. And so, you know, some of the things that make that very hard to do, I think that would be hard on the, you know, to determine on the PSC side is to say, well, you know, ACAM money as an example, that has to be built out for some of the carriers at the statewide level. So they may have areas assigned to them as ACAM that they don't plan to build out. It's going to be on the map as ACAM. It has federal funds assigned to it, but that doesn't actually mean that that carrier has to build out that area. And ACAM doesn't have to be finished until we get partially through the BEAD funding. So in that situation, how do we make a plan? You know, all of the emphasis is in coming up with this broadband plan to still be able to make sure that areas that get left behind in ACAM get 25x3, because effectively you can't move to 100x20. I mean, you can do them at the same time, but you have to make sure everybody's getting at least to 25x3 standard. So I think it's hard, even with the new mapping that will be coming out this week, to necessarily say an area is done, because some of those federal funds are funded in a way where the requirement for very large carriers is only held at the statewide level. It's not held at the census block by census block level. So I guess thinking about how that works, and does anyone get left behind? You know, the RDOF money for some of the vendors is not going to be assigned as well. So it's a changing, evolving area, I guess, that'll be tough to figure out how to figure out that gap that's going to be left.
Justin, you bring up a really, really good thing that we could possibly talk about in future meetings. You know, are there issues, are there ideas, are there items during the meeting that you would like to put on the agenda for this year for the task force? For us to dig a little bit deeper into, aside from everything, because we do have a lot to digest over the course of a year and a lot of exciting things happening.
So Kristen, this is Chris again. There were a lot of side conversations around the intricacies of BEAD funding, and a lot of comments made that we need to dig further into that, like the role of municipalities, or, you know, who are the various players and what are the different things that could happen with this funding. So that's certainly something I think we probably need to better understand. I heard that comment from a number of folks.
Other ideas or information that you would like?
This is Brittany. One of the things that was said during the first meeting of this new cycle was, you know, we're moving into this period of having a lot more funding coming down. It might not be enough to do everything, but we know that we want to maximize it throughout the whole entire state. And in the past, the maps have been, you know, the grants have gone out in certain pieces of the states, which is really great. But somebody mentioned that this is the time to close the gap as much as possible in all of the different pieces of the state. And that's a complex issue, but how can we as the task force help problem solve around that issue? You know, again, BEAD has all of these pieces tucked inside of it that could help with that, but I think we need to unpack it for our Wisconsin, you know, set of strengths and relationships and all of that to make sense of how that fits together.
Thank you, Brittany. So a lot of discussion that we need to have around BEAD funding, it sounds like. Or we're interested in having a lot of discussion around BEAD funding. Other items and things that we should be attuned to.
One of the things in relation to the nuances with the BEAD funding, the panels that we heard, there were so many different stories shared about communities and their collaboration and planning tools. But one of the things is making sure, and how can we get more input from special populations, and how do we make sure that everyone is included in this planning effort?
So thank you, Rachel. Maybe finding some success stories around some special populations or the input of people from special populations. Should go on our agenda, our collective agenda, our task force agenda. In the few minutes we have left for this discussion today, are there specific groups or success stories or people that you would like to hear from on page 2 of that shared Google document? We did have quite a few suggestions made, but are there others that, given the last few weeks and the upcoming new maps that are being released, who would you like to hear from? Some of our suggestions include United Way's Tequity, Door County Community Broadband and their approach to expanding broadband, the Forest County Digital Navigator and Chris Stark, New North's partnership with Microsoft Tech Spark. Who are other suggestions that might not have made it onto the list, or people that, since you've filled out your homework, have come to mind?
This is Jennifer Schilling from Dairyland Power, and I would just say that some of our co-ops, not all co-ops are doing the broadband, but we've got some co-ops. Pierce Pepin is one that comes to mind. We've got some in Eau Claire area that are doing some good things. So just maybe that's an option as far as serving our rural communities, that some of the new programs and projects and funding that our electric co-ops are pursuing, and that might be something of interest.
Thank you, Jennifer. A great suggestion. Other ideas?
We might also want to hear from the Lacta Flambeau tribe, and that team that was successful in getting that 25.6 million, and how they went, about that, and the success and some of the struggles that they have as they're moving forward.
Another great suggestion. It was exciting to learn about that. It would be great to hear how they organized and grew capacity to accomplish that. Other suggestions?
I guess I would say the state broadband office, related to just how we're moving forward with the planning related to the BEAD funding, again, that's kind of the $1 billion gorilla in the room here for the next couple of years. So I think how we are making sure that we put forward the best possible plan to make sure we can make the most of those funds. If there's any collaboration on that front, that'd be helpful.
Thank you, Justin. We definitely should hear from them. Yeah. Other suggestions? If not, I think we might be done with this portion of the agenda. Thank you all for participating and helping us debrief and capture some ideas for future meetings and what we want to carry forward from the October meeting. I will turn the agenda back over to you, Chris and Jaron. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Kristen. Anything to discuss before we move on to the panel discussion, Jaren?
Nope, not from my perspective. Nope, I don't think so.
So our next agenda item is a panel discussion. This includes local perspectives and best practices for local coordination. We have three folks joining us for this panel discussion today. We have Joe Ruth, the Government Affairs Director and Legal Counsel for the Wisconsin Towns Association. Hi, Joe. We have Dale Knapp, Director of Research and Analytics, Wisconsin Counties Association. Hi, Dale. And we have Zach Ruing, somebody I'm familiar with, Deputy Executive Director, League of Wisconsin Municipalities for, I think, 2 weeks now. So welcome, all three of you. Could each of you just take a few moments to introduce yourselves and tell us a bit about your organizations? And we can start with Joe and then go to Dale and then go to Zach.
Yeah, good afternoon, everybody. As Chris said, I'm Joe Ruth. I'm with the Wisconsin Towns Association. We represent the towns in the state of Wisconsin. There are 1,250 or so towns in the state of Wisconsin. Our organization provides legal information to town officials, education to town officials to help them learn the job, become better at the job, and so forth, as well as legislative advocacy and additional resources, however we can, to support our town officials across the state.
Thanks, Joe. Dale?
Hi, I'm Dale Knapp. I am the Director of Research for the Wisconsin Counties Association. And the Counties Association does for counties what Joe just mentioned, they do for towns. In addition, so I came over to the Wisconsin Counties Association in 2018 from the Wisconsin Taxpayers Alliance to start a research arm. So we also do research and publish research on a variety of issues facing Wisconsin, including a study on rural broadband we did a couple of years ago.
Thank you, Dale. Zach?
Good afternoon, everyone. As Chris said, Zach Ruink, new on the job here at the League of Wisconsin Municipalities, 4 weeks in today, and I'm traveling to the NLC, National League of Cities Conference. So unfortunately, I'm only on via phone, but great to be connected with all of you. Like my counterparts, the League provides membership services advocacy to over 604 Wisconsin villages and cities across the state. And given my tenure and role, I don't have a whole lot of perspective from members other than what I've gathered anecdotally through my own experiences or otherwise. But I will add that we do have a infrastructure series planned where we're going to have a number of members share their experiences of what they've been up to over the last years as it relates to broadband, and hopefully gain some more perspectives from those that will join the webinar through the Q&A and feedback session that we can share with the task force going forward. So glad to be connected and looking forward to hearing what others have to say. Thanks.
Thanks, Zach. And thank all three of you. So now we'll get into some of the specific questions that we have that hopefully you can provide some insight for us. Specifically, we're looking to understand better what you're hearing from the people you represent. So what are your membership saying in regards to the broadband expansion efforts in the state of Wisconsin and digital equity? Are there specific technical assistance needs, concerns, or issues with upcoming funding for broadband and digital equity? Or are there recommendations the task force should be making to better support you and your members? That's kind of a loaded question, but we're really looking at what you're hearing about broadband expansion and what our role can be in helping move the needle.
Well, I would say for our members, they've long, understood, especially in the rural parts of the state, the deficits in terms of broadband. But generally, we haven't been involved with all of the new money coming in. They're still trying to figure out, where to spend the ARPA money. Is it going to be in broadband? Is it going to be in other areas? So there's a lot of that going on. And one of the challenges I think that we're hearing from them, is really they've generally never been, that involved in terms of thinking about broadband and about, being involved in that process. And so it's, there's a learning curve that many of them are trying to get on, and so it's that I think that has been the challenge. What is the county's role, and really how do we, in terms of how do they go about figuring out what's needed, where it's needed, how to get it there. We've had a lot of broadband companies come and talk to the county boards, county officials, and again, it's very new to them in many ways. And so I think that's been one of the big challenges, is just the newness, and how do we get to where we want to go and what's our role?
I would echo a lot of what Dale has said for our town officials across the state. We have a wide level, of awareness and ability and kind of technical understanding amongst our town officials. There are certainly some that have become, champions for broadband in their area, whether it actually be someone who is a town official or a local leader who is working with the town board. That has worked very well in some parts of the state, but we have the opposite end of that as well, where the local community, the town board included, just don't have the understanding, or maybe they're hesitant because they aren't very technologically savvy, and they don't have the connections to the industry to even take the first steps in getting the process going. We have seen more success once that first step is taken, once there is a local champion or a committee or something to help get it forward. But we're seeing more problems, actually, more concerns from our members in just being able to take that first step. How do we get started at all? I will say, though, that our members are very encouraged by the progress that's happened, specifically with funding and with the new federal dollars that are coming down. They're anxious to see how this all plays out. Some of them are a little unsure that it's actually going to be as game-changing for their local community as NTIA and others have certainly expressed to our members, that all but the most remote hunting cabins will be served in the state of Wisconsin. That's a line that we've heard from NTIA talking with us and our federal lobbying partners as well. So we're encouraged for sure, but still some hesitancy there. One specific problem that I did want to highlight that a number of our towns are starting to bring to our attention is along the lines of local permitting for utility, for the service providers coming in, specifically in their right of way. It seems to be a problem that, and some of it is past problems that are now maybe materializing and unfairly, to some extent, affecting the newer providers that are coming in and that are very great actors in the space. But we have, for example, one town that recently adopted additional, more stringent permitting procedures and requirements for putting broadband in their town right of way, not because of a current provider that is looking to bring broadband to the area, but actually because of specific issues they've had with different providers previously in the last few years. In that town specifically, there's a provider that didn't get a permit at all and didn't restore the right of way when they left. And there was so much rock and rubble in the area that the lawnmower of the town employee who came through, not only was the mower completely wrecked, but it actually flipped over. And I don't think there were any serious injuries, but that employee quit because of the issue. And again, I don't think the town has done anything wrong from a permitting standpoint and so forth. And that specific example isn't representative of the whole state. But I guess the problem I wanted to point out is that it seems that there might be some past actions or some bad actors, as there is in any industry and as there is in local government, that might cause additional problems for current or better actors in the state as well, specifically along the lines of permitting. So that's one challenge that we've been hearing about outside that isolated incident, others as well, but I just wanted to bring up.
Zach, anything on the municipal side?
Yeah, Joe, I'm glad you mentioned that permitting piece. We did just hear a kind of a bit of a horror story, and I think you're right that some of our members might be looking to rectify bad past actions by providers, but at the same time, we want to make sure as we maintain our our objective and our goal to deploy, that we help our members navigate some of those permitting questions that they might be trying to impose or to maybe even clean up on the other end of the spectrum. So I think that that's something that we could identify collectively. I think on the question of equity, given most of our members have some form of critical infrastructure, asset-based medical institutions, obviously government buildings, those types of facilities in their community, we do hear, that there still are competitive, affordable, and access issues, reliability issues within their municipalities. And I know that those are pretty broad themes that continue to get brought up, but I think the task force can continue to shortlist places where those are of concerns, and collectively where the relationships between, whether it's the EDCs or EDOs, maybe the county if the city or the village doesn't have the capacity. But I think so much of this can be done in a variety of ways to be able to achieve the goals. But again, back to the technical assistance that the other two mentioned, and just understanding where the municipalities can play a role, potentially across those political or within those political boundaries, are something that some of our members are trying to grapple with and understand when they see big dollar signs or see big grant agreements, those types of things.
So I think we've heard some of the things we've heard in the past, collaboration, communication with local municipalities as utilities are installed is a bit of a barrier. And I think the one we've heard a lot is the technical assistance piece, because one of the things that I know has been very clear is we've seen communities with successful broadband applications is that they have somebody in their community at the table who knows broadband, and they're pushing broadband, and they're really their subject matter expert. And the communities who don't have those tend to be looking for somebody to help them with that. And I think that's the hole that we've identified so far. And it sounds like that's consistent with what you've heard as well. In addition to that, local coordination is obviously a key component of both BEAD and digital equity. How can the task force, the Public Service Commission, the Broadband Office, and other stakeholders interface with you and your membership regarding best practices for coordinating locally?
Well, again, for counties, I mean, there's a couple of ways that, I think we generally make it pretty easy. We actually do a fair number of webinars with our members, and they're very well attended. And so, that's one possibility. We also do a quote unquote Monday morning meeting every week, which is attended by 200 to 300 members. And so we make it very easy for people to get in front of our members on topics that they find important. And so we did something on broadband probably in 2020, very well attended. And so that's, I think that's the easiest way to get in front of our members, and it will be well attended, I think, if we do something like that.
With the towns, we do a lot of similar educational opportunities, and I think PSC and the Broadband Office have been putting out a lot of great information. The one suggestion or piece that I've heard from our members that maybe I could make to the group here is any way to simplify the information and maybe even condense it would be helpful. Oftentimes we hear from our town members that they just feel inundated with information and opportunities, and that leads to them more often than not ignoring it, and ignoring the latter half, the latter pieces of it, or not digesting it all because they're confused when there are multiple opportunities thrown at them in a relatively short period of time, that they're not sure how they interact with each other. Was that the same thing I already read about, or is this an entirely new opportunity? And with how many different programs there are and how much additional money we're seeing, we're going to have some of these problems, certainly, but any way that that all can be simplified to some extent would be beneficial, I think, to our local officials.
In a word, probably say the same. I think our members, if they're not already engaged on the topic, getting them engaged is going to take some encouragement, but also some really simplified ways for them to identify their path forward. And so I would concur with the other two in that.
And I'm muted. Sorry about that. So thank you, Zach. We're moving through our questions fairly quickly, so you feel free to take a few minutes on this one. And this is an open question for each of you. Please take some time to make any final remarks or emphasize anything you feel would be relevant for us to hear. Keep in mind that our goal here is to make sure that we're partnering with as many folks as we can to make communication clear as we're working through this. Some of the things you've talked about are things we've identified. How can we make sure we continue this conversation, we stay connected, you look to us as a resource, we look to you as a resource, and then again, any final remarks that you feel are important for this group to hear?
I can lead this one off, Dale. I guess the other parts that I would add here isn't going to be anything new to this group, but certainly our members want to see a continued prioritization for unserved areas over underserved or those that are more served areas of the state. We still have too much of the state that really has truly no access. I know at the federal level, we've seen some, although maybe not too much discussion so far, but some discussion of raising the standards of what is considered unserved or underserved. And I think from a technological standpoint, that's certainly the direction we're moving, where what we're using in our day-to-day online life is going to increasingly require higher speeds, better upload and download and so forth. And I think that's an important part of the conversation. But at the same time, I think we need to be cautious about moving the goalposts like that too soon, to then increasingly put more money towards areas that have maybe adequate for today's standards service over areas that truly still have no service, where they're really still fighting to just get connected at all. In addition to that, I guess another priority that our members bring up to us is trying to find ways, continue to find ways to avoid duplication of efforts with all of the new money that's coming down, making sure that we're effectively and efficiently allocating these resources to make sure that we're not duplicating where there might already be service and so forth. So again, continuation of a lot of the same conversations that this group and the public generally, for that matter, have been having is certainly another piece for us.
I a lot of that. I think what the one area that I think that our members in many areas, especially the really rural areas, are really struggling with is the fiber versus fixed wireless, and there's been several companies that are coming in, making presentations on a variety of fixed wireless type plans, and there's just not an understanding on whether or not that's it's obviously a good investment in the short term, but as Joe mentioned, with speed, with all of the speeds going up and the volume needed, is it a long term? Is it worth it long term? Or and so fiber is more expensive, so that all of those trade-offs, and there are a lot, and there's really, I guess that they need a resource that can help them walk through that trade-off in their situation, and that's one of the things they really struggle with. Which direction do we go? And sometimes you kind of get frozen because, again, this is sort of a little bit unfamiliar to them, and so they don't know all the ins and outs. And so I think that's and I don't know if that's sort of your role, but I think that's one area that they really need help in terms of decision making.
And I think for my part, thinking about what NTIA and others are talking about with, I would say, navigators or resource advocates, where they've got a NOFA federal opportunity for funding right now available. I wonder to the extent that how the state can create some sort of similar program that would be an extension of what the task force can do to demystify, to address some of the things the others have, and we've talked about already today. Some of that I don't think we can underestimate the hand-holding that can occur, that can help people see and realize maybe a couple of steps forward that they may not otherwise take because they really don't understand it. So I would just say we can't simplify what needs to be done in certain places, particularly as you maintain a statewide focus.
And kind of adding on to that, I think our organization, certainly the Towns Association, but I think that'd be the same for the others, can definitely help as a go-between for some of that information. We all put out a lot of information, regular intervals to our members. We have the educational opportunities where we're going around the state providing that. So if there is some of that, I think certainly we can be helpful there. Additionally, I think as a go-between between providers and local governments, if there is a difficulty connecting with providers that might be available in that area, I would certainly be willing to try and connect with the town officials in that area, and maybe PSC or others could help with that facilitation of bringing the right people together. I still think the more difficult part is even the step before that of really trying to just get the ball rolling, that flywheel going just a little bit, and then building momentum off of that. So any ideas that you all have on that really beginning technical assistance of, here is just a plan, here's what worked well in other communities, a roadmap for the initial planning stages of, we know we want to take the first steps, but we don't know what those first steps are, I think would be helpful.
Thank you. And we have a few minutes, so we can open it up for any questions the task force may have for our three panelists. Are there any questions from anybody on the task force? I have one. So I've worked with each of these organizations before, and you each serve a specific population. How do you guys communicate, right? Because when we're talking about broadband, it's very rarely within the corporate boundaries of the city of Marshfield, right? It goes out into the townships. It also bleed over into areas that the county would have jurisdiction over. So what do you guys do from a communication standpoint on those issues?
Do you mean between our three organizations?
Right. So when there's issues that are impacting a municipality that also impacts the counties or the towns, how do you guys communicate?
I think our three organizations are in almost constant discussions and communications on a wide number of issues. Dale and I just came from a meeting an hour and a half ago, and the league was there as well. So I think the dialogue is open and ongoing between our organizations on just about every issue. Actually, it seems to have been working well recently.
Yeah, I would echo that. On all of those issues, I think all of our organizations have the mindset of not just let's do what's good for counties, what's good for towns, what's good for municipalities. We want to do what's good for the state, and so we understand that we have to work together on all of these issues, and so that communication is there on all of these issues, and we don't always agree on the way forward, but there is that constant communication.
And that's all great to hear. I've been in some of those meetings. I know there's not always complete agreement, and that's okay. So I want to thank you for your time today, meeting with the Broadband Task Force and telling us about your organizations. Obviously, you have a really important role as we expand broadband throughout the state. So again, thank you to Joe Ruth from Wisconsin Towns Association, Dale Knapp from the Wisconsin Counties Association, and Zach Verwink from the League of Wisconsin Municipalities. We appreciate your time. Thank you.
Yep, and thank you for all the work you guys are doing.
All right, moving on in our agenda. Next up, we have Chad Young, Chief Executive Officer for Novato, and Chad is going to be talking and presenting to us about internet service providers. It seems like something he knows something about. Go ahead.
Fair
Chad.
enough. All right. Thank you, Chris. So I'm really appreciative of the opportunity to speak with you today. So hopefully I can provide some information to help us move forward with our mission on the task force. Like Chris said, I'm the CEO of Shawamigan Communications Cooperative, also known as Norvato. And our cooperative was formed in 1950. We have approximately 80 employees today and provide service to the northwestern portion of the state, having facilities in Ashland, Bayfield, Douglas, Sawyer, and Price counties. And if I could, I'll just share my screen here real quick, just to give you a visual of that. This is where we currently have service. In this map here, you can see in the blue shaded area, that is our, what we would term our incumbent serving area. And the green areas are what we would call a competitive areas that we've branched out into. And I'll show you a map here in a little bit that's going to have some of the new areas where we've been awarded grants and that we've been successful in those applications to give you a little better picture of what we're all working on. Today, we serve approximately 14,000 households and more than 1,700 businesses and deliver over 161 terabytes of data each day. It's also important to mention that our network uptime surpasses 99.9%, so service outages are extremely rare. And that's due to us having multiple backhaul paths, so in the event of a fiber cut, our customers typically won't see any difference in their service as their traffic is rerouted almost instantaneously. In 2019, just about the time that we were finishing deploying fiber to our incumbent serving area in Bayfield County, we purchased Price County Telephone, or PCTC. And much to the chagrin of some of our employees who thought they saw the light at the end of the tunnel. But at the time of acquisition, approximately 15% of PCTC customers had fiber to their home. And since that time, a number of grants awarded through the Wisconsin State Broadband Expansion Grant Program have allowed us to build fiber throughout the entire PCTC serving area. So today we're nearly 100% fiber to the home. We're just finishing up our Price County build, and hopefully we get another week here before the ground's too hard to keep plowing fiber. And I just thought I'd mention, and why fiber? And I don't think I need to sell this group on fiber, but fiber is a superior technology because we view it as being future-proof. And today, providers are deploying fiber capable of speeds of 1 gig, 2 gig, 10 gig, and more. But I just read an article last week that they achieved 1.53 petabits per second over the standard diameter fiber that we deploy today by multiplexing 55 modes or colors. And just to put that into perspective, that's enough to handle the entire world's traffic over a single fiber. So one of the main reasons. So from my point of view, it's important that we put our limited dollars into deploying a future-proof technology because there's a lot of investment that's going to be needed in the future to upgrade the electronics and maintain those networks going forward. But I'll talk a little bit about that here in just a little bit. So Norvato, just to give you a little bit on our company, differs from a traditional corporation in that we're a cooperative. And instead of shareholders, we're owned by our members or our customers, and our 7-member board of directors is elected by our members. Any net income that we generate goes back to our members in the form of capital credits, which are paid in arrears. But due to the tens of millions of dollars spent on deploying fiber in our incumbent serving area, we went a number of years not paying capital credits. But when we talk about affordability and those type of things, I'm a strong believer in the cooperative model. And as an example, each of our members this year were paid capital credits, which equated to approximately $118 each. So basically a month of service. We placed a significant focus on community involvement, and you'll hear why that's important in a little while, but also on local economic development. Our employees log over 3,000 hours of community involvement each year, and we also give in excess of $25,000 in donations to a variety of nonprofits, and that total amount has surpassed over $1 million through time here. So always trying to add to our local communities. And being owned by members or customers, we're driven to provide a quality product at an affordable price. And despite being in a very rural part of the country, our prices are benchmarked to a number of other providers and also rival the offerings in larger metropolitan areas. And I thought it was worthwhile because fiber enables much more than that high-speed internet connection. And when I mentioned providing a quality product, Norvado is seen as being an innovator and a leader in our industry because our fiber allows us to offer a full suite of products to our customers, including VoIP telephone, high-speed internet, and video. And with VoIP telephone, we're one of the few companies in the country that offers VoIP to nearly our entire customer base. And what that means is that our customers have a high-quality voice connection at a lower cost than a traditional telephone line. And today, our customers essentially receive a free telephone line if they subscribe to our internet service. Our lowest speed offering today is 300 meg download by 300 meg upload. And we offer up to 1 gig symmetrical, although we're capable of delivering up to 10 gig should it be requested by a customer. But to be honest, that isn't something that many are looking for today. Our traditional linear television offering is very robust, and I think it rivals any offering available through other cable or telecom providers. But the cost of content is a considerable concern. And while we've priced our linear TV to be more or less a break even for our company, if I hear a complaint, it's never about internet, it's always about the price of TV. And I would say that's probably the number one concern if you talk to the average consumer is how much they're paying for that television. And so to combat this, we recently rolled out a new streaming service, which allows our customers to stream their local channels at a much lower cost. And we then bundle this with a credit that can be used to purchase apps like Netflix or Hulu to customize their viewing experience. And we actually just held a class here in cable last night, which was well attended to teach folks how to use streaming. And the net result, if we can move folks away from that linear TV, is $1,000 savings per year for a customer. And the way I view that is that that's $1,000 that each of those folks will probably be putting back into our local economy at some point. And so multiply that by 14,000 people or more, and you're talking some real a real boon to your local economy. So what I like to term as our greatest problem is the fact that so many residents and businesses just outside our serving area lack sufficient access to high-speed internet. And in rural parts of the country, like where Norvado operates, the business case is very poor for deploying fiber, as I'm sure all of you know, because we've been talking about this for some time. But where there's, the number of homes is often 4 to 6 homes per square mile. I compare that, I saw a number recently that Manhattan has 72,000 per square mile. So to give you an idea about the economics being a little different in northern Wisconsin. And to a point that Chris made earlier, you also need to consider that a good penetration rate in the Northwoods here today is approximately 60%. And that's due to a variety of reasons. Some aren't maybe adept at using the internet, but there's also a lot of second homes and hunting camps and things like that today. And today, there are counties here in the Northwoods that are considered to be 95% geographically unserved, lacking access to either internet speeds of 25 by 3 or 100 by 20. So the Broadband Expansion Grant program here in Wisconsin, it's really been essential in our success in bringing high-speed internet to more residents and businesses. And the prospect of additional grants being made available through the Capital Projects Fund and the Broadband Equity Access and Deployment, or BEAD programs, is very exciting. And it's exactly what's needed to be able to serve the areas that are lacking today. So I was going to bring up a map here to share with you, although, hold on one second, I need to stop that so I can switch to it. Let's see. So you saw the earlier map. This one actually shows the areas where we've been awarded grants in the recent past. And you can see Price County, we did very well through the grant program, again, a very rural area. And most recently, a path that'll serve approximately 1,500 homes that's going to go from the Winter township of Winter up to Clam Lake, as well as a variety of other smaller projects that we've been able to do and been able to get service out to more and more customers. So something that I do think is it's important that the task force understand is just that for nearly all grant programs, with a few exceptions, there have been a few recently, some of the Reconnect through the NTIA were funded at 100%, but providers are required to contribute at least some portion of the project in a grant application. And so for a $10 million project, which isn't necessarily that large, this could be $3 to $7 million for a provider. And so cash flow becomes an issue for companies our size as we're unable to do an unlimited number of projects. And so, for example, I anticipate that for Norvado to participate in all the rounds of the future funding, we're going to need to borrow in the range of 8 figures in order to participate in those rounds. And so there's also a timing issue there. So just a few different things that I think are important to be aware of. And that's frankly on top of any existing debt that companies like Norvado have. And we do have some outstanding debt through the Rural Utility Service of the USDA. And that's a long-term burden that needs to be repaid. So provided we have the financial means, we then begin considering projects that are viable for grants. And we don't work in a vacuum when we're considering where to deploy fiber. And while we do employ a mapping expert who assembles data in unserved and underserved areas, there are a number of entities or partners that we work with to identify areas in need and gain support for grant applications and deployment. And this is where Norvado, being a local company and involved in our communities, really comes into play. So I regularly meet with the county boards and administrators in the areas that we serve, and it's really not unusual that I field questions or provide presentations at the county level and even at some of the towns. This not only keeps them in the loop on what we're working on, but it also helps us identify pockets of unserved locations and garner their support for the projects that we work on. I should also mention that it's very helpful when counties establish a broadband committee, as we regularly work with those as well. And I know Jaron knows about those because him and I see each other in a little tile like this quite often for some of the different county meetings that we attend. But like I said, the same is true for individual towns and cities where we meet with their boards on a regular basis. And numerous counties and towns have also been designated as broadband forward communities. And that's helpful because it provides a focal point for providers and can help with permitting issues, which we heard a little bit about before, and I'll speak more about in just a little bit. Economic development groups and chambers of commerce have also been a great resource and a partner for us in the past. Part of my personal involvement in the communities we serve is that I've been in an officer role and or part of the board of directors for numerous chambers and economic development groups. And other providers may be a great partner. We recently submitted an application to the NTIA Middle Mile Grant Program, where we partner with WIN, Wisconsin Independent Network, who is a regional fiber backhaul provider. And that really strengthened our application because it shows you that you have someone to construct the highways or the backhaul fiber, as well as someone to construct the local roads, which would be Norvado. And so that partnership really brings things together and helps us serve more people in a larger area. And then other partners that most may not think of are local stakeholders. And I think that may have been where Chris and I have crossed paths a number of times, as Marshfield Clinic supported our applications in the past. And like was mentioned earlier, a local champion, that can be huge to a project. A resident who's passionate about bringing fiber to their area could be a terrific partner. And a great example of this could be seen in a grant that we did for a small, sparsely populated town called Cloverdale, where there was a passionate individual, and he worked with us and laid the groundwork for the grant we received by organizing his neighbors, appealing to local and state government, and lending us support in the process. And so I truly don't think we would have moved that one forward without him really acting as a champion in that area. And then lastly, state and federal legislative support is huge and has really been one of our keys to our success. I regularly interact with our state and federal regulators, legislators, and visit Madison and Washington, D.C. on a somewhat regular basis to make sure that, that our legislators are on the same page. So all of these partners help to illustrate the need for fiber in the rural areas of Wisconsin, and their support can help push a grant application towards being awarded. And while monetary support is a great help, we don't necessarily view that as being essential for funding a project, but it definitely shows a different level of support or a commitment from that county or town. And some of the ARPA funds that were made available, we had great success working with our local partners to have them put some of those dollars towards our applications. And again, it shows that they are behind that they see the need, and that they're hearing from residents and businesses in those areas that they need fiber. And those letters of support are also critical. And in that middle mile grant application I just mentioned, we actually submitted 57 letters of support along with our application. And so those are the type of things that we're doing to try to make sure that we move forward and that we grab some of those federal funds here in Wisconsin. So once you've attained the funding and the fiber deployment project has been planned, I thought it might be helpful to show you an infographic here I recently received from US Telecom, which is the National Trade Association, that gives you a little overview of what the process is. So let me go ahead and bring that up. So like I was talking about the planning phase, you have to look at the technology, the cost, what are your funding sources, supplies needed for deployment, engineering, you have to work through that. Then you get into the permitting, and permitting can be a variety of things, and you'll see that over here in the acquire access rights portion of this infographic. But permitting can take a substantial amount of time. And honestly, depending on what it is, I'm always fearful when we have to cross a railroad track. I think you'll talk to folks in our industry who will tell you it took them up to 2 years in order to get permits to cross a railroad track. So those are definitely some obstacles that we have to look at and try to overcome. And you know, in between there, today we pretty much bury everything because ice storms, wind storms that bring branches down, those are things that make going aerial over poles somewhat difficult. And frankly, there's an ongoing cost when you do pole attachments. And so it's just been our approach, and I'm not saying it's the right approach, but it's been our approach that we typically bury because we have a lot less maintenance over time when we do put that in the ground. But again, if you go on poles, there can be insufficient capacity, which you may have to modify or build a new pole line. Even burying, you may be going into historic districts, you may be going, like it says here, into environmental areas where we have to do environmental studies, crossing wetlands, things like that. And so those all can add a cost or delay to a project. And then you finally get into the construction phase. And what I think is important, and I think Steve brought it up earlier, is that, you know, these days there are some significant challenges related to obtaining fiber for fiber deployment. And the lead times have really gotten long since the start of the pandemic. They can be in excess of a year at this point. And what that means is that if I don't have fiber on order today for next summer, I'm probably not going to get that project done. And so I talked, for example, about that area from Winter to Clam Lake. I have all of that fiber sitting in a yard down in Winter right now because I'd rather have it on hand and put it in inventory for a period of time than not have it when we want to start constructing. Because that's the other problem, is that contractors, labor is in short supply. And frankly, the more money that's put out there for broadband, the more work those contractors have, the more difficulty we have in getting them dedicated to a particular project. I will mention, and it's always not our first option, but when talking about materials, American fiber, typically Corning or that type, has very long lead times, but we are seeing some foreign fiber, Italian, Korean, Chinese, being in some cases a significantly shorter lead time. So it might not be your first option, but if that's what you can get your hands on, that's what you can get. And the same thing is also true for things other than fiber that you need to construct that network, such as pedestals, splice cases, etc. So so all those things are in short supply today. So just continuing on here, once you get through finding your crews to work and trenching and repaving and obtaining consent from homeowners in order to put that fiber in, as well as multi MDUs or multi-unit buildings may have separate permissions, you're able to get that fiber in. Now, this is very simplified, but I thought just kind of a good example of some of the things that you have to go through in order to bring a project together. And then lastly, I just thought it was very important to mention that building and deploying fiber is really only the beginning of providing a high-speed internet connection. And I think that this point is, it's not always discussed, but we're only able to provide the services that we do because of our incredible team of employees here. And providing advanced services, maintaining a reliable network, providing exceptional customer service, that all comes with a considerable cost. And it's also worth noting that other than fiber, the devices that power a fiber network are more or less a digital computing equipment base, and it has a relatively short lifespan in today's world. I sort of look at it like those electronics aren't really that different than your laptop or cell phone, and I think we all know how often we're replacing those these days. And so it's costly to maintain and upgrade those electronics. And I think Moore's law has held quite true in recent times, and so the speeds that customers expect are constantly going up, and that requires you to have to put new electronics out there as well. So with that, I know I wasn't sure how long to go. Jaron asked if for 15 minutes. Hopefully I didn't go too far over that, but I'd be more than happy if anybody has any questions. Always willing to talk about anything folks would like to put on the table.
Thank you, Chad. Are there any questions from the task force for Chad?
This is just a question. And looking at your info presentation there, thank you so much. I always like those. It provides a perspective in terms of being able to follow up. When I was looking at number 5, I know earlier there was a statement that was made that sometimes the difficulty is having subscribers prescribe to broadband. When you look at perhaps building this infrastructure, is that number 5 one of the items that you look at in terms of customer base? How many customers you're looking at being able to build into the system? When in your planning phase, is that number 5 a key ingredient in that planning process?
No, good question. Absolutely it is. So when we're developing that initial business case, that's absolutely one of the numbers that you have to consider is your payback on that project. And so when and that's why typically when we're looking at the take rates for fiber once it's installed, a good take rate in the first year would be 30%. And hopefully you can ramp that up to 60 to 70% over time, but that's about the top end today from what we see. And I think a lot of that is education. And for example, there was a committee a few years back called the Connected Aging Communities Committee, which I know Gail and Chris and a couple of others were part of. And there were some classes and things that were done with some of the elderly folks in Manitowish Waters, actually. And I think that really probably helped their broadband adoption, just because they need to be educated in how to use these things, just like we were doing with our streaming service. And so those things are meant to bolster that demand. But good question.
My follow-up question is that when these type of fundings are made available to agencies, what would you consider being perhaps a savings for folks that subscribe when perhaps there are federal resources to make the these resources are, because I know it's very costly when you're looking at the build out in infrastructure, right? Very costly. But when you have these resources that do become available, what would be the savings? What have you seen to be a savings for customers that are subscribing thereafter? And when you mentioned the education and the selling aspect, saying, well, because now it's been subsidized, it's been funded, that actually it makes it more viable and more cost efficient for you as a customer from a customer base perspective.
Honestly, the economics are to the end customer. We really still have to charge the rates that we have to charge, regardless of whether or not that project is funded by a grant, is the reality of it. And it's because these rural areas where, like I said, if it's 4 to 6 homes per square mile and I'm getting 2 to 3 subscribers, the payback on that is 20, 30 years, even if it's 70% funded by a grant. And again, you have to build all of those operating costs that we have on an ongoing basis into that model as well. And so we think that we've been very aggressive trying to get the costs for service down, but I can say it doesn't significantly eliminate it. From my perspective, if we can be on par or perhaps even a little better than what they charge in the major metropolitan areas, I think we're doing very well for rural Wisconsin.
Any other questions for Chad?
Yes, this is Brett from Reedsburg Utility /Lightspeed. Chad, I'd just like to say that's a very, very good presentation, and I want to echo, we see a lot of the same challenges that you do, and we see that 60% take rate too, even in South Central Wisconsin. And I guess I do want to echo the matching fund challenge for small providers. With all this grant funds out there, that matching component now is getting tougher and tougher to meet with more grant funds coming out there. So, we have to find loans and we can just no longer cash flow those matching funds. So as more grant funds become available, I see that being more of a challenge for these small providers. So I want to echo that sentiment that you mentioned.
Thanks, Brett. No, that's helpful. And that's really, we've been doing in excess of 10 million a year in construction. And we've been able to do a lot of that the past few years out of pocket, but those pockets run dry at some point. So, yep.
Brittany, you had a question?
I think Beth Myers had her hand up before me.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Thank you, Brittany. And Chad, I just want to thank you and Nervato for what you're doing in northern Wisconsin. As you just pointed out, there's not a lot of vendors that would like to come to our area because of the 4 or 6 people on that dirt road. I happen to be one of them, so please come to my neighborhood soon. And I just want to thank you for the last 8 years that we've worked together. I know my office has written several letters of support for your projects, and it has been a pleasure to do that for you and Nervato. So take care, Chad.
Oh, thank you, Beth, so much. And just to say that Beth has been a fantastic advocate for getting broadband and fiber out to the Northwoods here. So thank you, Beth. I really do appreciate it.
All right, Brittany, now you're up.
Thanks. So Chad, I had a question regarding the issue of funding employees. So it's the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act. And it sounds like it's not necessarily on your side that you would need to expand your workforce entirely. It sounds like it's on the contractor side. So what do you feel like they would be interested in seeing from the technical colleges, or what are they doing already? And what are some suggestions on that side?
Sure. Well, I love to talk about this topic. And Wisconsin actually has one of the most advanced programs from a technical college in the country. It's through Northwood Technical College. And they have a broadband specialist program, I believe is what it's called. And they've been very progressive in getting that out there. There aren't many other states that actually have that. And we've sent a number of our folks to that, and I know that our contractors use that as well. We do need to scale as we become larger. We're always looking for more employees there. Some of the things that I can tell you Nervato has been doing, because we do have a lack of workforce here in the Northwoods, and we've actively worked with our high schools in our area. We actually brought in a guidance counselor from 13 different schools a couple of years ago, sat them down, kind of went through the breadth of different positions that we have available, and actually went through pay ranges and those type of things. And we pretty much have an open policy that if we have high school kids in our area who want to work as an intern during the summer, we do provide paid internships. And I can't say that we've turned any or many down in recent times should we have somebody who wanted to intern. So we've been trying to develop that workforce. But again, through Northwood there, they do have an apprentice program that students can enroll in. And I know that there's a number of different telcos that are participating in that as well. So I think trying to grow that program and encourage folks to participate in that would be a great thing to do.
Any other questions for Chad? All right, well, Chad, thank you for the presentation today. It's always interesting to hear about what's happening way up in the Northwoods of Wisconsin, especially when it's really cool stuff like fiber to the premises and ubiquitous coverage. So thank you.
You're very welcome. Thank you for the opportunity.
All right, well, we're making good progress today. Jaron, next on the agenda is next steps.
Yeah, so you're right on. We're ahead of schedule here, so we might be able to return some time to folks. But this actually dovetails pretty well this kind of workforce conversation. Behind the scenes, we've been having some discussions about highlighting workforce development at the next December task force meeting. So I wanted to flag that for folks. One thing that I wanted to ask is we are scheduled to meet on Wednesday, December 21st right now. There's been discussions about maybe we moving that up a week to Wednesday, December 14th. So I am going to quickly open up a poll, and if task force members could just vote and let me know or let us know if they have a preference, that might help us. I know the December 21st date works for some of us on our side, but it obviously is getting a little bit closer to the holidays. So it looks like someone opened up that poll for me. So if folks could go ahead and vote now if they want December 14th, December 21st, or if they have no preference. So I'll just pause here, leave that open for maybe a minute or two.
I will say this is exciting. I'm watching the results in real time and it's like election night. We still can't declare a winner. Still too early to call.
Just as long as you don't keep us up until wee hours of the morning before you call it, Chris.
Yeah, well, it seems to be running away with the 14th right now. Either no preference or moving it to the 14th with about 80% of the vote. So doesn't sound like there's a lot of support for keeping it on the 21st right now.
All right, well, I will probably leave that poll open for just another minute, but it sounds like the 14th is the winner. So we will have some discussions behind the scene, but I will, as long as everything goes as planned, I will kind of adjust the calendar outlook and let folks know that aren't able to attend right now, and we'll get that all updated. But for right now, I would say plan on the December 14th. We'll keep the time the same as long as that's okay with everyone, 1 to 3 p.m. Kind of seems to work, but if anything doesn't work from the timing, we'll be certain to kind of communicate that out. So that's all I had for next steps. Yeah, again, just flagging that workforce development conversation for the next meeting, and December 14th will be the next meeting date. So Chris, I'll let you wrap us up here, and then we'll get wrapped up probably about half an hour early.
Well, I think that our vote was just incredibly efficient. I think we should reach out to Arizona and tell them we've got some suggestions for how they can improve their election process. Thank you, everybody, for your time today. Thanks to our presenters who presented some really good information. We're getting into that holiday season time, so I look forward to seeing everybody in November. And as always, if you have ideas or suggestions for future agendas, please reach out to anyone at the broadband office so that we can have those on the agenda. We appreciate your time today and can give you back 30 minutes of your afternoon. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Y'all take care. Be blessed.